Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another Ask the Expert session. These sessions are designed to help you get your questions answered about a specific topic. And today's topic is going to be migration with the configuration assistant. So it'll be myself and my colleague Dan. Dan might be just a few minutes late. So he'll join us in just a couple of minutes here. Okay, so let's talk about migration and the configuration assistant. So since we're pretty new with these Ask the Expert sessions, we do a little quick slide to clue you in as to what we're trying to do here. And really the purpose of these Ask the Expert sessions is to provide you a forum whereby you can get your questions answered basically on a specific topic. Now, of course, if you have a topic of interest that you'd like to talk about, please just drop us an email. You can just send it to me or any other Bentley colleague and tell them to forward it to me, or I'll be able to turn it over to the right people. So I'll just drop my email into the chat window. Remember, this is supposed to be kind of a communication thing, so don't be bashful. You are amongst friends. Basically, the way we like to do this in terms of communication would be either type into the chat window, which is a lot more controllable, or if you don't have that ability, you could use your microphone, but we tend to find that if too many people are talking at the same time, it becomes extremely confusing. So usually chat is the best way to get it done, unless you have something complicated to talk about. All right, so having that under our belt, let's move on. We have been making a lot of changes to Connect Edition as compared to V8i, and one of the major changes that we made was to the configuration system. And of course, in the previous version in V8i, we used to call that the workspace, the V8i workspace. So what we've changed are locations of folders, we've changed levels, variables, and files, and a variety of other things, such as the system folder is now the default folder and moved into program files. Interfaces are parts of Workspaces and WorkSets, not a separate item. The organization folder is a new folder, and it used to be called the standards folder. We also added a couple of new levels. So in V8i, you had 5 configuration levels. In Connect Edition, we have 7. So these 2 new levels here, workspace and role. And I guess this is a little bit unfortunate in terms of terminology. It's a little confusing because obviously we used to refer to a V8i workspace as a collection of CAD standards and files. In Connect Edition, a workspace is just a level in the configuration. So just don't let that throw you. There is an additional one here called role, which does help to identify the role that the person plays within the organization, whether that's a drafter or an engineer or a reviewer or project manager. We may wish to control their access to folders, provide them with specific tools based on their role. So, just to get things started here a little bit, I know you probably have a bunch of questions on this topic. Let's just do a little bit of basic what happened. So what did happen? In Connect Edition, we have a top level called configuration. Underneath the configuration lies workspaces. And workspaces can be just about anything you want them to be. They're a very flexible construct. They could represent departments. So I might have a workspace that represents electrical, architectural, structural. They may represent clients. So perhaps there are certain clients of yours, or client A, B, and C all have their own individual workspace because each client has their own CAD standard. So workspaces are a very flexible structure, kind of representing how you group your projects together. And so work sets are projects. And I like to start here usually. I think, okay, I've got a bunch of projects. How do I group my projects together? I can group them together by department. I can group them together by client. I can group them together by a variety of other ways. But how do I group these projects together? So that might help you to understand what your workspace really is. Is my workspace a collection of clients, a collection of departments, a collection of facilities? So look at your projects, sort of figure out what they're oriented towards and how you group your projects. That'll provide some information to help you understand your workspaces. Now, the organization are your CAD standards. These are the CAD standards for your organization and are applicable to all projects, all departments, all locations. So this might be your logo or specific borders, things like that. So that's Connect Edition. In V8i, what we used to do, of course, we used to have a workspace folder. You're all familiar with this. That's why I kind of went to Connect first. And there was an interfaces folder, a projects folder, a standards folder, and a system folder. So let's take a look at this. Workspace becomes configuration. Projects become work sets. Standards becomes organization. We get rid of interfaces, and we get rid of system. All right. We've introduced new variables to point to these locations. So these operational variables under our USTN variables, the configuration points to configuration. There's an odd thing here. There's workspaces root and workspace root. Note the plural S. So workspaces root points to workspace. Spaces, this folder right here. So there you go. And then workspaces root, a workspace root, I should say, is the individual object within the workspace. So it might be a department. It might be a client. So workspace root points to your client, to your department, to your facility. Then you have standards for that department, that client, that facility. So this is where your CAD standards for your client would go. Then there's work sets root. So I may have more than one project with a client. Let's hope so. So if I have more than one project with a client, then I'll have multiple work sets. And those work sets are grouped together in this folder, which is pointed to by work sets root. The individual project is a work set, and that's work set root. So here's the project. Here's the design files and drawing files for the project. And then here's the standards for that project, work set standards. So this is project-based standards, cell libraries that will only be used in this project, images that will only be used in this project. And then finally, we have organization. And organization, of course, is going to be our organizational CAD standards that apply to everybody in all offices, all departments, all disciplines. There are other ways of looking at this. Obviously, we provide a very flexible system, and sometimes it's the problem is that it's too flexible, because then people get kind of confused because there's so many ways to do the same thing. So I just want to remind you that this is our basic setup, but there are other things you can do. So workspaces root and workspace root. Don't let that throw you. It's a tricky one. It also happens here with work sets root. There it is again, the plural versus work set root. So that's kind of a problem. We've got this huge amount of data in V8i that needs to be ported over correctly to CONNECT Edition in order for us to maintain our CAD standards and continue to draft according to those standards. So how do we do this? We could do it manually. That's perfectly plausible. It's a bit of effort. And I'm sure you'll end up running down some blind alleys at some point. But we first decided to try to give you some automation tools. And then early in the CONNECT Edition releases, we had something called configuration migration, the configuration migration wizard. With release 11, or update 11, I should say. Can I just say release 11? Somebody smacked me. So with update 11, we have provided you with the configuration assistant. So let's go take a look at this. It's update 11. It is limited access, so it requires a token. You will have to contact me to get this token. So once again, if you are interested in using this configuration assistant and testing it out, it is available by token only. It is going to be general access in update 12, which means that you will have the option of not installing it during installation. In the installer wizard, there is an option to turn it off. But right now, in update 11, it's not available except through the token. So just drop me an email and I'll send you the token. All right, so with regards to the general access, by the way, update 12, that we're hoping for very soon. There's just a couple of role holders, is what we call them, things that are preventing us from releasing. Actually, it's not even things that, it's things that we have dependencies on. So it's not even stuff that we could fix if we wanted to. We're just waiting for another team to finish up some work before we can ship it. So really hoping for end of this week or shortly thereafter, just get that other team to get their work done. All right, so update 12, very close. So this configuration assistant will be available general access in update 12. And by the way, in update 12, we fixed a couple of bugs in the configuration assistant. So hopefully that'll help. So really based on taking our legacy data like UCFs and converting them to workspace configurations, legacy PCFs, converting them to workset configurations. It moves all of your site level configurations to the organization and optionally allows you to copy all of your files. So let's go take a quick peek at this. There we go. You'll find the configuration assistant available from the start page here. So where you can choose your workspace and your work set, it's under the workspace pick list. So there you go. There it is. It says configuration migration. We're going to put some additional tools in here too, probably. So we're just keeping it as configuration migration. One of these tools, and the main tool right now for today, is the configuration assistant. Okay, the configuration assistant, as you can sort of see, is very wizard-like. So it does have, a few questions and then a next button. So right now it's looking to see what's installed on your machine and where are your workspaces located. So I can go browse for a different workspace if I wanted to. So even a project-wise one. No, actually, don't do that. The project-wise dialog box was not meant to come up. We are working on something like that, though. Don't worry about that. That's one of our next enhancements to this will be to create your managed workspace for project-wise. All right, so you can go and locate another workspace if you had one. So, for example, in my case, I have like an E drive and then some other old workspace maybe that'd be interested in working with. I'll just leave it the way it is right now. Now, once I've chosen a workspace, and almost invariably this is going to be a server location for most of us, we can do our configuration migration with just our configuration files, or we can do the configuration migration with our configuration files and our DGN libs, our cell libraries, our resource files. So essentially we could, and this is the most common option, is to create a configuration with the DGN libs, the cell libraries, the resource, all that. So this is a better choice, usually. The idea is that now I've created a completely separate folder structure that only MicroStation CONNECT Edition looks at. So MicroStation V8i looks at its folder structure. MicroStation CONNECT Edition looks at a separate folder structure. This option here will convert all of your configuration files, your UCFs and PCFs, etc. However, it will not convert or not clone the DGN libs, etc. Those, in this particular case, choice number 2, both V8i and CONNECT Edition point to the same DGN libs, point to the same resource files and cell that's possible. As you know, we don't change file formats, and we haven't changed any file formats going from V8i to CONNECT Edition. So this hybrid V8i CONNECT project is possible. It's a transition thing to help you move to CONNECT Edition. But in general, we would prefer if you choose the first option to create a completely separate CONNECT Edition folder structure. All right, that's what I'm going to do. And off to the races. So hit next here. So now it asks me to select my users. Now, in this particular case, I have several users being pointed to by my V8i workspace. So it's up to me to decide which ones I want to choose. So here you can see I can look at a user and its particular project. So I can say, no, not that user. Or maybe this is probably a better one. Don't want that one. And I'm going to turn off a couple others here. Let's see here. I'll turn off this one and that one. So these are my users. These are all the projects underneath each user in V8i.
I'm still in contact with him, and he sends me stuff every once in a while.
Is there a question coming in? Can't quite hear you. Not loud enough. Sounded like somebody was asking a question, but couldn't quite hear you. Okay, my volume's all the way up. You can type it in if your microphone isn't working perfectly. Okay, so now I can, as you can see in here, come here and choose which users and projects to convert. So I can do hundreds at a time if I needed to, which is a big advantage of the configuration assistant over the configuration migration wizard, which did one UCF PCF at a time. All right, so now that I've decided which projects I want to migrate to the CONNECT Edition, I now have to decide where I'd like to put them. So again, I can go browse for something here and put them in a location. Anywhere I choose. And then the last step here is to just simply start the migration. So one of the interesting things that it does at this particular stage is to let you know that the underbar USD and underbar custom configuration variable needs to be updated because we're now pointing to the eTemp folder. So it says I need to update this variable to point to that location. Are you okay with that? It says you will need to restart MicroStation, though. So that's okay. So I had some successes and some failures. So let's see what failed here. So this is kind of interesting. You can see in this particular case, it said I can't do these ones because they're part of multiple users. So if you have a project name that's the same in different users, it has a problem with that. Something we're looking at, it's not exactly an easy fix. If it was, we would have done it already, but we're looking at several different options. If you have the same project name in multiple users, it's got a problem. So just a heads up for you. Okay, when I click on finish at this point, and then I restart MicroStation, the assistant should be done. Well, you'll see the results of it. I am using update 12, by the way. And just waiting for I had to cancel my ProjectWise login. So there you go. You can see there's the default examples and those other ones that I had. So there's examples. There's my examples from V8i, classic V8i example set. And when I go click on Browse, well, it's going to go to ProjectWise first because I'm doing some ProjectWise integration testing. So I apologize. I should have turned that off before I started here, but it's easy enough to do. But there you go. It goes straight to that V8. Look at that. It goes to temp Workspaces examples. So this is nice. It copied everything for me. And it stuck it into the correct folder. So there's temp. And you can see that actually that's an old one. There's Workspaces, and there's all the stuff that I just created. So that's the clone method. So generally, that's the recommended method as well. Again, you'll find it in Update 11 and forward, simply by going to the workspace list and choosing configuration migration. Definitely want your feedback on this. We've tried lots of different test cases. We haven't solved a few edge cases, so we went after the majority of what people use this tool for. You know how it is. Configuration is something that is so detailed that everybody has their own way of doing it. And some edge cases, it'll get you close, but it's not going to solve every one of your problems. And I find that's generally the case with most people. The configuration assistant gets you really close to a complete Connect Edition configuration, but invariably there's going to be a little bit of minor tweaking. So what you're going to go do is you're going to go in and open up your cell libraries, check your line styles, all of those things that are part of your CAD standard to make sure that your Connect Edition configuration can see everything. And on the rare occasion where it's missing something, that's when you might want to go through and just edit the configuration files to point to additional folders or files. Okay, let's see here. So some general questions that we've had about this. So hopefully this will help prompt some of your questions as well. So does configuration system work if V8i is not installed on the same computer? It actually is looking for an installed version of V8i, but as a substitute, and I haven't actually tested this per se, but as a substitute, it does this. So going into the C drive and program files and Bentley, MicroStation CONNECT Edition, MicroStation Default, I think, and then System. Yeah, I know. Wow. There it is. V8i. There is a set of variables, folders, files, etc. inside this substructure here to allow the configuration assistant to work. So if you go and you drill into this, you'll see there's your classic configuration files that are needed for going between V8i and, so these are all the V8i versions of these files. Okay. Version update 11, and then with update 12 it'll be general access, and moving forward it'll be commercial access in update 13. Is this going to work with vertical applications like OpenRoads Designer? Yes, it does. They will be adding in their own little variables that they may need to swap out. So an in-rows variable swapped out for an OpenRoads variable. But otherwise, yeah, it works perfectly with OpenRoads Designer, OpenBridge, Open Building, and OpenPlan. Is it a separate download? No, it is not. It is part of MicroStation. So it's not a standalone. It's built directly into MicroStation. So we're definitely looking for some feedback. What else you'd like to see it do? I've run this probably on, I don't know, 20 to 25 or so workspaces. Sometimes it's perfect. I mean, it's just like it runs right out of the box. Sometimes, like I said, there's some tweaking, the missing library, a missing DGN lib, or the GUI DGN lib list wasn't properly specified somehow. So it, in general, will get you like 90 to 95% of the way there. Unless you're doing something super complicated, which the manual method is usually better there and faster there. So we're certainly opening it up for questions. I hope you have some feedback on this. Any questions at all about how to use it?
I got a question, Samir.
Sure.
Yeah. In the beginning, you had mentioned some of the things that were changed and removed, and you had put a big red X over user. So it's still using a user, but it's using the Windows user. Well, you said interfaces, which so where is the user, and is that redirectable?
Thank you. Great question. And yes, the interfaces are really part of the workspace and the workset, so they go away. But the user really is a user now. If you remember in V8i, and I'm sure most of you are still using it, in V8i, a user was, well, really anything you wanted it to be. It could be English versus metric. It could be V7 versus V8. A user was a filter. In Connect Edition, a user is a true Windows user, somebody who's logged into Windows. So here we go. I go into see users, go into my login name, and then into app data Bentley, local, and then Bentley. And then under MicroStation, and in the particular version that you're working with, there is a prefs folder. And this is where you'll find all of your personal information. This is where any customizations that you make to MicroStation as a user are stored under this personal DGN lib. How you dock your things, your personal user configuration file. So variables that you'd like to set. So this is the real user, and this folder is hard-coded, kind of, sort of. There's a workaround, but I wouldn't recommend it because it messes something else up. We're looking at changing this. This is underbar USD and underbar user config, underbar user CFG. Like I said, it's hard-coded, so you can't move it to another location at the moment, but we are looking at giving you the option to move it to another location.
That was my next question. Was it still redefinable by an organization if they wanted to have like a roaming profile?
There is a way to do it, but you sacrifice something else. This is actually pointed to by home prefs. And if you actually go and you look at user config, it's locked. There's just no way into it. And so you won't even see it in the configuration files. None of the CFG files have it. It just, the CFG files will reference it, but there's no definition of it in any of the CFG files. So, yeah. So that all does go away. And again, the press folder, we haven't really implemented roaming profiles yet either. So really it wasn't such a huge thing for our users, but yeah, let me just quickly, show you this, and I'll hopefully. Oh, by the way, Configuration Migration Wizard is also available through here, the Configuration Assistant, I should say. There it is. It's also there. And then, I guess I'm not showing all of my variables. But you'll see that it's locked. It's not a variable that you can mess with. Is that a critical one for you?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say that, yeah, I know that some organizations like to be able to redirect where the users, their UCF, their preferences, their AccuDraw shortcut files, things, function keys, things like that they use, a user can basically edit specifically. And that can be obviously local, but if it is for a roaming profile, it would be nice to be on a server. And also for a CAD admin person, if there's a problem with the user, the admin person could go to the server where their home root is and see that UCF file that they claimed that they didn't edit, but they did. And
that never happens.
No, it never happens. They were on vacation, so but somebody else touched their machine. So, but
no, that is a critical app. I mean, that's a critical part because we check it. We've had people redirect cell libraries and put bogus information on information, and then because MicroStation still reads reverse, right? User takes preference over my standards. Is that not correct? Or did that change?
Nope, that is still correct. But you can lock a variable. Remember that. Because you're in first as the administrator, you can lock a variable and prevent them from redirecting it. So there's the %lock command. And that's...
Yeah, I haven't done that because I was trying not to be too big a jerk. But I checked. I have a workspace that actually syncs. I had a routine that actually looked at a user's workstation that ran a script every time they logged on, and it compares the workspace to a standard. And if they've made any changes to anything, it totally overwrites their workspace. And they get the standard that way. I keep everything consistent through all the users. That way, you know what I mean? It was just a way to keep things consistent. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's just consistent.
Right.
And now with this being buried under user profiles, I actually had a routine to check that. I looked at the user profile. I was like, UCF. I compared the size and the date. And it's like, okay, if they made any changes to that thing, I know they mess with the workspace. So now that kind of goes out the door for me on this going into Connect.
Well, and looking at this, I was actually using Configuration Explorer. And Samir, correct me if I'm wrong. It's what the variable that tells it where to look is the UStation home root.
Yes.
I'm seeing that. Not to tell you what your job is, but I'm seeing it as unlocked as a variable. So it looks like it is still redefinable as a variable. So if it's underscore UStation underscore home root. So if that is still redefinable, then it will function, if I'm reading this correctly, it'll function as V8i did before. So an organization can redirect the user's preferences. Because I know that what I've done there it is, yeah. What I've done in the past is, because the user, often the user's machines are not backed up, and when they do make changes, their preferences, probably most importantly, they've arranged, and also the XML files that remembers the docking of dialogues, things like that. If their machine gets wiped out and they don't have a backup of their user preference or their UCF or any of the other personal files, it becomes a point of pain for them, because then they have to start with the defaults and kind of rebuild everything.
Oh, yeah. So
oftentimes, redirecting that to a network drive and or to a folder, and at one agency I worked with, that they actually had on their C drive a folder called data that is their organizational policy. That folder got backed up for the user. So that was a local folder that got backed up so that we could put things in there knowing that we would have backup of it.
That makes sense. And actually, if you look at the msconfig.cfg, you'll notice that it actually does set that home roots and home prefs right here. But what's interesting is that when it uses it, so it goes in and labels the UCF as personal, and it tells you where that is, but it doesn't allow you to change it.
So there's no actual that later.
Yeah, but see what happens if you define that later, you end up changing this local user app data path, and then things like the XML files and the other things like that, they all have to follow you too. So
right. Which is historically what I've done is basically everything goes.
Right, everything goes.
Everything that would normally be under the Windows user is now relocated to a different folder.
That's correct.
Yeah. So good. That's good to know.
Hey, Samir?
Huh?
I understand what they're saying about the things like that, on a network. The problem is that we get we see a lot where the user preference file gets corrupt.
Uh-huh.
And that's a common thing. But it gets corrupt much faster when it's on a network than when it's local. And that's why when I say I'm going to say Bentley support doesn't recommend putting the user preference file on a network, because we just get too many phone calls where it gets corrupt way too fast.
Yeah, that's one of the...
So, and that's different than a function key menu or some of the other things like you were talking about. But too many times, something's not working. They can't get into files. They keep getting kicked out every time they try to open a file. We rename the extension on the user preference file, and all of a sudden, it rebuilds it, and everything's working fine. And like I said, we just see it get corrupt much faster when it's on a network than if it's local. So that's the only thing I would warn about.
Yeah, Joe, this is Sam. I've got a question. Is that you were experiencing that corrupt UPF with V8i? Or was that earlier versions? I know going way back, to, MicroStation 95 and J and things like that, I know the UPF files, there was a problem with them. growing, and I know that my experience. I know that when Bentley disconnected the UPF from the process, it used to be if you had MicroStation open, because it kind of kept a link between that MicroStation and the UPF wherever it was. And if you tried to delete the UPF while MicroStation was running, it wouldn't let you. But now you can delete the UPF while MicroStation's running, and you won't get an error message. So I saw that as kind of a not to keep a constant link. So I guess your experience has been with V8, V8i having UPF corrupt problems over a network?
Yeah, we're still seeing it with V8i.
Okay.
You're asking a big question. I don't know if how much we're seeing it with Connect. We still get calls. We get the mixed calls. We still get the V8i calls. We still get the Connect calls.
Yeah, hard to tell who's who.
I can't think off the top of my head that we're seeing it that much with Connect.
Well, the disconnect was done in V8i. Well, it was done in, I think it was XM, I believe, was when the disconnect kind of, where it wasn't MicroStation kept it open. And that was,
we're definitely still seeing it in V8i.
Okay, all right. All right, yeah, thanks. I appreciate that input. Good to know. And your network is stable, right? You don't have drops and stuff like that in your network?
Well, I'm running it local, so I'm not seeing it. But
okay.
Yeah, this is Rick. I'm actually in Bentley technical support, and I'm going by the calls we get from users calling in support.
Oh, got it. Sorry, Rick. I thought I saw Joe's speaker going.
That's okay.
Yeah, I thought that was Joe. Hi, Rick.
So I'm just going by what we see in tech support when users are contacting us.
Got it.
And so I cannot tell you, do they have a stable network? They may not. Maybe that's why they're calling us, and that's why it's getting corrupt on the network.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because
yes. I thought you were.
No,
I didn't realize you were with Bentley, Rick. I thought that was Joe talking.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to give you the feedback.
No, that was good. That's good. Thank you. But it's good to know that it looks like it still could be redirected. Correct, Samir? The whole.
I'm going to have to do some additional testing because the last time I tested it, it wasn't a good thing.
Didn't work well, huh?
Yeah, it did not play well with others.
Okay, all right.
And I know that we have something filed to examine it. I think we'll be able to handle this pretty straightforward, but with just a couple of other considerations. There was one other consideration I'd like to just maybe briefly talk to you guys about since we're talking about this. It's this configuration setup.cfg files and program data. It's a file that you're not supposed to write to. And if those of you who are watching, you were noticing that I was actually doing that, so my bad. It's a file that's automatically written to by MicroStation. So I just want to throw it out there just to remind you, don't mess with it. It's handled automatically by the software. Don't use it for other stuff. Don't slide other variables in there. Leave it alone. Okay.
Now, Samir, was that in context of the migration or just in general?
It's been coming up a lot as people have migrated over because they see it and they're like, well, what do I do with that? It's a tempting thing to play with because it's a configuration file sitting right in front of you. You're like, well, let me open it up and look at it. And it's got some interesting things in it. So the temptation was to play with it. Now, we are going to probably end up moving it. In fact, the reason I kind of did want to mention it was we're going to move it to that same location. That is to say, it's going to go to the prefs folder where the UCF and the DGN libs and the XML files and UPF all work. So, just a quick FYI.
Is there an update number that is targeted for?
Probably 14,
Okay.
which would be June of this year. So, other questions for today? All right, thanks everybody. If you do want the configuration assistant token, drop me an email and I will send you the token and the instructions on how to use it. So the email's in chat. And
I do have one question. When are you going to have a session on a mixed environment and project-wise of Connect and V8i?
Interesting. So you want to have a project-wise environment that can handle both V8i and CONNECT clients.
Well, I call out a workspace location in project-wise right now for my V8i. So I call, like, if I have people open up electrical drawings, it opens up the electrical user configuration or project. It's actually a project configuration, but it opens up the electrical project as well. There's no libraries.
Uh-huh.
Somebody that's in mechanical, they have a mechanical section. I have a civil section. Well, those are hard-coded in project-wise. And that structure is totally different, as we have seen just through this demo in CONNECT Edition. So if I have project-wise, I'm trying to do a phased approach to project-wise CONNECT Edition upgrade. So I either have, I'm going to break one of the two of them currently if I go into project-wise, correct? That's what I'm looking at. I break one of the two.
You know, Gary, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but if you drop me an email, I'll put you in contact with somebody who can help you for sure.
Cool. That's a big concern for me right now, trying how do you do a phased approach?
Yeah, that doesn't seem like that would be a favored approach to break one and start with the other, right? There's got to be a phased transition that's smooth instead of this giant cliff you have to climb.
You think that so, but I'm not seeing it right now. But maybe my eyes just aren't opened up correctly.
Yeah, there's a lot of buttons to push.
So, okay, I'll drop you a note. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all for attending. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day and spending it with us. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Samir.
Thanks, Ed.